This is actually my thesis topic, the topic for my thesis during my PhD, which was the preparation and strategic plan of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for Islamic Jerusalem, for Jerusalem to be taken by the Muslims and become the Islamic city that we know of Jerusalem. It has been published, unfortunately, in Arabic. So it's published in Arabic, although the original one is in English, but the translation has been published before the English one. But if anybody has a suggestion in the US, it would be better than the British publishers who made me really so angry about that. Whatever about that, inshallah we'll speak about it. I'm not going to speak about it, why? About publishing. Inshallah, whenever it is published in English, inshallah, I'll be so happy to send some copies as a gift for the community here in Toledo. What do we know about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's relationship to Jerusalem? Usually, whenever you mention Jerusalem with the name of the Prophet ﷺ, whatever comes to your mind, what is it? The first thing that comes to your mind? Al-Isra al-Mi'raj, the night journey. That's right. Al-Isra al-Mi'raj, or the night journey, and that is right actually. But was it the only connection that the Prophet ﷺ has or had with Jerusalem? Qibla, yeah, that's right. But for how long? Usually 16 months. That's it. Actually, when I started my studies on this issue, I was surprised and shocked, actually, to some extent, to see how deep the Prophet ﷺ's relationship to that city was really strong and deep, and if I could say old, since the beginning of his prophethood ﷺ until after the end of his prophethood. So, when did that relationship start? You remember the day when the Prophet ﷺ was sitting alone in that cave, Hira, and the revelation came to him, and Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam came to him and said, Iqra, 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 to the extent, until the end, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So where does Jerusalem comes here? Not yet. A few days after that, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's second revelation came, the relationship between the Prophet ﷺ and Jerusalem started. How is that? How comes? Actually, when you speak about prayer, many of the Muslims actually believe that praying towards Masjid al-Aqsa actually was only for about 16 months, and that is right because it was mentioned in Al-Bukhari. However, who reads that hadith of Al-Bukhari neglects the beginning of the hadith. They read just the middle part and the end of the hadith, and they neglect or they do not just concentrate at the beginning of the hadith of Al-Bukhari. The hadith of Al-Bukhari about changing the Qibla, about praying towards Baytul Maqdis, what does it say? It says in Arabic, it says, صلى رسول الله إلى بيت المقدس وبعد أن هاجر 16 أو 17 شهرا. The Prophet ﷺ prayed towards Baytul Maqdis, and after he migrated to Medina for 16 and 17 months. So the hadith doesn't mention that the whole prayer was 16 or 17 months. Why? Because we know that the 5 daily prayers were obligated for on Muslims when Isra al-Mi'raj, night journey. That was before or after the Hijrah? Before the Hijrah, about 1 year before the Hijrah, by the way. So the hadith mentions 16 or 17 months after the Hijrah. What does this leave us with another year before the Hijrah? Actually, that is actually as well wrong. Why? Because we have another time before that when the Prophet ﷺ was praying. What happened during the night journey was that the Prophet ﷺ's daily prayer were set into 5 obligatory prayers. What about before that? Before the night journey, there was a prayer. And that prayer, according to the hadith of Al-Bukhari, Sayyida Ummuna Aisha radiallahu anha says, the prayer before Isra al-Mi'raj was 2 ruk'ahs in the morning and 2 ruk'ahs in the evening. In addition, by the way, to Qiyamul Layl, because it was obligatory at the beginning. Amongst all the Muslims, it was obligatory. Now, when did that start? So the concept of the prayer did not start by the night journey. The concept of prayer started well before the night journey. And actually that happened day one of his prophethood. When he was ordered to send or to deliver the message to everyone, he was ordered to pray as well. How? Ya ayyuhal muddathir, oh you who was covered with your what's it? Muddathir. Blanket? Okay, yeah, blanket. That's a nice blanket. Was it blanket? Okay, maybe blanket. Okay. Well, because I know that the blanket's a little bit small. Duvet, maybe. However, all you who is wrapped with your blanket, if I could say, قم فأنذر. Stand and give the news. Warn people. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. And this, the word رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, according to many of the ulama of tafsir, the scholars of exegesis, they say that this means actually pray. If you do not accept that, then the next surah that was revealed right after that, Surah Al-Muzzammil, the one who was wrapped in his blanket as well, another word, it says, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, qum al-layl illa qalila. Stand up and pray at night, except for a small or a short time, where you can sleep. So what does that mean? It means pray. And Imam Ibn Ishaq actually put this part, the prayer, the start of prayer, right after the part of his book that speaks about the beginning of the revelation of the Quran on the Prophet ﷺ at the beginning of his prophethood. That means that prayer actually started from the year 1 of his prophethood. And where did the Prophet ﷺ pray? We have a lot of hadiths that mention that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray next at the Kaaba, next to the Kaaba, next to the Kaaba, next to the Kaaba. People think that he used to pray towards the Kaaba, but actually he wasn't praying towards the Kaaba. There is a hadith in Imam Ahmad tells us everything about that. It says, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي بمكة قبل بيت المقدس والكعبة بين يديه. The Prophet ﷺ, while was in Medina, while living in Mecca, used to pray towards Bayt al-Maqdis, towards Jerusalem, while putting the Kaaba in front of him. So he wasn't praying towards the Kaaba, he was praying towards what? Jerusalem. What does it mean? It means that the Prophet ﷺ never prayed like we pray today around the Kaaba, wherever you want. There was a single place where the Prophet ﷺ used to pray next to the Kaaba, which is that area behind me. What is this? This is Ar-Rukn al-Yamani. And maybe this is why there is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to touch this place. If you would like, when you go to Mecca, inshallah, anybody never been to Mecca before? 1, 2, 3, never been to Mecca? 4 people. MashaAllah, a lot of people went to Mecca then. Okay, may Allah accept from you, and may Allah make it easy for everybody else to go, inshallah, to Mecca very soon. Next time when you go to Mecca, if it's still not your first time, make sure if you would like to pray where the Prophet ﷺ prayed for 13 years in Mecca, just try, if you can, definitely, because it's too crowded. Try to pray next to Ar-Rukn al-Yamani. So your forehead might touch the place where the forehead of the Prophet ﷺ used to prostrate. You don't know. But in Medina it's fine, you can pray anywhere, because the Prophet ﷺ prayed everywhere in Medina. However, that means that the Prophet ﷺ prayed towards Baytul Maqdis not only for 16 or 17 months, that was in Mecca. He prayed towards Baytul Maqdis 13 years in Mecca, and another 1.5 year in Medina. What does it leave us with? Mathematic. 14.5 years out of 23. So how many years did the Prophet himself ﷺ pray towards Mecca? 8.5. 8.5. Does that mean that Jerusalem is better than Mecca or more important? No, don't worry. No, don't say that Abdallah said that. That he's recording. So don't say that. No, That doesn't mean so. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let the Muslims pray during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, towards Jerusalem for 14 and a half years, and towards Mecca for 8.5 years? Because they knew what Mecca represented. They knew even before Islam. We know the story of the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, "Ana Rabbul Ibil," I'm the one who is responsible for these camels. وَلِلْبَيْتِ رَبٌّ يَحْمِي. When the Kaaba was about to be destroyed, he said, Allah Azza wa Jal can protect his house of worship. So they knew the Kaaba and they knew how important the Kaaba was. But what they did not know actually was that they had another place that was very important for them. They never knew about it, which was Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So this is why Allah Azza wa Jal directed them towards Baytul Maqdis, made them pray towards it for 14 and a half years. Why? In order for you to know that this is your place. And by the way, we all know Al-Arqam ibn Abi Al-Arqam. We all know this Sahabi, this companion, because of his house, Dar Al-Arqam, where the Prophet ﷺ used to gather his companions and teach them. What people do not know about him as well was that Al-Arqam was the first one ever to ask a permission from the Prophet ﷺ during the Mecca period, even before the migration, to go and pray in Masjid Al-Aqsa. So because he knew that this mosque that we've been always praying towards is quite important, so he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and it's mentioned at Ibn Ishaq. He says, "Ya Rasulullah, I came and asked you for permission to leave." He said, "Where are you going?" He said, "To Baytul Maqdis." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Why are you going to that area? Are you going for business? وَمَا يُخْرِجُكَ إِلَيْهِ أَفِي تِجَارَةٍ?" He said, "No. لا ولكن أصلي فيه." He said, "No, I would like to pray there." The Prophet ﷺ told him that now it's the time where you pray towards there, but in Mecca. Do not go there. You will go there one day. So that was the most important thing that made us actually connecting towards that land. Not only that, that started from the beginning actually. On the 4th year of the Prophet of the Prophet ﷺ, a major incident happened in Jerusalem. A war started actually a few years before that time, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ's beginning of his prophethood. A war started between the Persian or the Sassanid Empire and the Byzantine Empire. The Sassanids or the Persians attacked Urfa with Edessa in English, which is Urfa, because I'm in Turkey, I have to say Urfa. Şanlı Urfa, Allah aşkına. Allah. Okay? So, Turkish is very nice, by the way, but it's very hard. Alright. What was I was speaking about Urfa, and I just forgot about everything. Because it's a nice city, by the way. They have a nice kebab there. If you go, they attacked Urfa, and they started marching towards Istanbul. Then they marched back down towards Antioch, or Antakya of today, or Hatay, as we call it today. And all Arabia at that time were just chilled, and they were just watching the news. Why? Because they know that their business every year goes to Sham, to the Levant. This is why they wanted to check what happens there. They watch the news very seriously. It's the same as you watch the news of North Korea and Mr. Trump today. So, if you watch the news. So why? Because it affects them. And even the Prophet ﷺ was one of them. And that was at the beginning of the prophethood of ﷺ. The 4th year marked a very important event in 614 CE, which was the 4th year of his prophethood ﷺ. The Persians marched from Antioch, and Antioch fell. Antioch is a very important city, by the way. It is a major religious city for the Orthodox. And the Quran never commented on that. Then they marched toward Homs in Syria, which was at that time the 2nd largest city in all of the Levant. The Quran never mentioned that, and the Prophet ﷺ never commented on that. They marched toward Syria and it fell. No comment. They marched toward Adri'at, which is Dar'a today. It was, at that time it was a big one. It's not a small city as today, was it? And the Quran never said anything. They went towards Qisaria in Palestine. They couldn't take it over, but they lived and they left it and they went to Jerusalem. They had a fight next to Jerusalem, not far away from Jerusalem, about 20 kilometers away from Jerusalem, next to a city that is well known today by the Palestinians, Jericho, Ariha, the oldest city in the world. A fight happened there, and that was the last battle that happened before the total fall of all the Levant and Jerusalem. And the Quran suddenly comes directly to comment on that. Alif Lam Mim. Alif Lam Mim, yes. غُلِبَتِ الرُّومِ. The Byzantines have been defeated. في أدنى الأرض, at the lowest part of the land, which was next to Jerusalem, by the way. وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ, and they will be, after their defeat, they will be victorious. وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ سَيَغْلِبُونَ فِي بِضْعِ سِنِينَ, in a few years. You know what is important about that verse, about these verses? These are the first prophecies. These comment the first prophecy in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first prophecy ever in the Quran was revealed, related to what? To Jerusalem. And it was a big deal, by the way, in Mecca. This is why Abu Bakr, and it's a well-known story, at that time, betting, it wasn't haram at that time. It was the beginning. So Abu Bakr had a bet with Ubay ibn Khalaf that the Byzantines will gain the victory against the Persians. Abu Bakr said within 3 years. So when he went to the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Abu Bakr, the Quran never said 3 years. The Quran said bid'a, few. What does the word bid'a mean? The Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Abu Bakr, إِنَّ الْبِضْعَ مَا دُونَ الْعَشْرِ. The word bid'a is less than 10. So Abu Bakr came directly to Ubay and he said, well, how about doubling the bet and make it up until less than 10 years? And he said, okay, you bet, I'll do that. After, when I checked that, it's there. When I checked it, actually, I found that it happened exactly at the same time that the Quran mentioned. Exactly 9 years and 10 months. 9 years and 10 months. So it was only 2 months before the end of the Bid'ah. It happened. And the Byzantines gained the victory against the Persians. And Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. And on that day, the mu'mineen, the believers, will be joyful with the victory from Allah. That moment, when the news came all the way from that battle that happened, the first battle that the Byzantines gained the victory over the Persians, it was the same time when the Muslims actually were victorious at the Battle of Badr. Because of Badr. So it's the meaning of the Quran. Now you can understand the verses very well. So for the Muslims at that time, Jerusalem was not only the place that they were praying towards, it was the place where the manifestation of the prophecy of the Quran actually was done. It was a manifestation of of the prophecy of a prophecy that came true in the Quran. So it had this high rank. Not only that, despite this, the Prophet ﷺ started to find hardship in Mecca, and he continued to find hardship until he had the worst day of his life. The Prophet ﷺ went to At-Ta'if after he lost hope in Mecca. So, how was he welcomed in At-Ta'if? We all know this story. I'm not going to tell this story because it's a very hard one. He was stoned, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His feet bled. Can you imagine the Prophet? The man that people today stand in front of his grave after 1400 years of his death, bowing their heads to the ground and paying respect to him. Can you imagine him, this great man, whom the kings cannot stand in his face, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after his death? Can you imagine him running in the streets and people are stoning him and saying, liar! Can you imagine that? And the blood is shedding from his feet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was the hardest day in his life. To the extent that he raised his hands and he said, "Oh Allah, I complain." He didn't say, "Please do this," or "Please don't do this," or "Please do that." He just said a complaint. He just sent a complaint to the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how was the answer from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The answer for him after his hardest day in his life was here in Jerusalem. After Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam had his hardest day in his life when he was thrown in the fire. You know that story. What Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. After that, and we saved him, Ibrahim, and Lot, his nephew, to the land which we have given barakah, or blessing, to all beings. The same happened to the Prophet ﷺ. After these years of hardship, and after that very hard day, the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands and gave the complaint to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And directly he was taken to that land to get the comfort. And not only that, it was the ceremony, if I could say the inauguration ceremony of the Prophet ﷺ. Although I know in America now the word inauguration reminds you of someone, with this hair, whatever. Okay, happy, fantastic, sad. Okay, now I know that, but it's inauguration at that time of the Prophet ﷺ as the leader of all humankind. The true leaders, according to Islamic faith, the true leaders of humankind are not the kings, are not the sultans, are not the emperors. They are the prophets. This is why the Quran tells us about history of humankind, of human beings, in the form of the history of who? The prophets. قوم صالح, قوم نوح, قوم لوط, Musa wa Fir'aun. So the Quran tells us the story of human beings as of what? Of who? The prophets, in relationship to the prophets. Because the prophets are the leaders of human beings and are the leaders of humankind. Now these leaders came on that day to pay the respect and give the, if I could say, the banner of the leadership of all human beings and all humanity to the Prophet ﷺ in this mosque, in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So it was like the inauguration day or night or event or ceremony of the Prophet ﷺ. This is why he had to go there. He could have been going directly to heaven from Mecca, right? Allah Azza wa Jalla can do it or not? Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sure, easy. But he had to go first to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he went to heaven. And notice that one thing, which is actually, if I could say, more weird, strange, large, bigger, larger. Is it Al-Isra from Mecca to Medina, from Mecca to Jerusalem, or Al-Uruj, the ascension from Jerusalem to heaven? Which is stranger and bigger and larger and longer? Definitely. Can somebody say something else? How long is actually the Isra? The Isra, there are two journeys. Al-Isra, the night journey, and the Ascension. Two journeys, not one journey. Two journeys in one night. The Isra is actually 1,000 miles, that's all. 1,000 miles. You can do it today very easily, right? Going and coming back at the same night. But how long was the Ascension? It's infinity. infinity. You don't know. Nobody knows. This is why it's beyond our expectation and our understanding. However, the Quran comes with a whole surah, chapter, called Al-Isra, where the ayah that mentions Al-Isra is mentioned in سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله إن إلى نوره من آياتنا. Yani glory be to him who took his servant through a journey at night from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa to the end of this ayah. What about the ayat of Al-Uruj that mentioned the ascension? They came in another surah, but wasn't called Al-Uruj or Al-Mi'raj. It was called Al-Najm, the star. Why Allah Azza wa Jal didn't call it Al-Uruj? Why Allah Azza wa Jal didn't call it Al-Mi'raj? Because, and why He made a very long one, a very long surah named Al-Isra? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's standards are different than ours. According to the standards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is easy. Isra, Mi'raj, nothing, everything is easy, nothing. But according to the standards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Isra, the night journey, is yours to think about. It's for you, the nation, the ummah, the believers. But Al-Uruj, the ascension, was special to the Prophet. So what do we have to do as Muslims, if we know that, when we know that the Prophet ﷺ was ascended to heaven and he saw Al-Jannah, he saw the heaven and he saw hell and he saw all of this stuff. Does it add to our Iman anything? It added to his Iman because he saw himself. So that after that night, he used to speak about heaven after seeing it, and used to speak about hell after seeing that. But for us, we didn't see. We didn't go with him. But when we speak about the night journey, Al-Isra, it's for us. Why? Because that night and that event, praying as an imam, leading the prayer, or leading all the prophets in the prayer, meant that his ummah, his nation, has taken the leadership of all humanity from other nations. So it is yours. So the Muslims were now they understand that that land was quite important. And one of the most people who loved it because of that night was Abu Bakr in particular. Shmi'na. What is the meaning of Shmi'na in English? How come? How come? How come? Shmi'na, that's in Palestinian accent. You know Palestinian accent? There are many Palestinian accents, by the way. How many Palestinians are here? Okay, well, we have about half. Okay, Palestinian accent. We have not only one Palestinian accent. We have many Palestinian accents, like saying kursi and chursi, like kalb. Kalb means dog, and it means heart. Okay. However, that's challenge. Whatever. I'm just joking. Now, what took me there? We were talking about. Sorry.
How come?
How come? Why the Ishma'na, that's right. Why did Abu Bakr ﷺ had a very high status for Jerusalem and for Masjid al-Aqsa on that night? You know, he was called a Siddiq, right? Why? He believed in what? No, he wasn't the first believer. So he believed in the night journey. Actually, the hadith doesn't say so. What? It is right, by the way. What you said now is right. But let's go to that point when he was called as-Siddiq. They came to him in the morning and he said, أَلَا تَرَى إِلَى مَا يَقُولُ صَاحِبُكَ? Haven't you listened to what your friend says? He knows that your friend means Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, what did he say? They said, يَزْعُمُ أَنَّهُ أُسْرِيَ بِهِ الليلة إلى بيت المقدس ثم أصبح بين ظهرانينا. He claims that he was taken by night to Bayt al-Maqdis and he was, in the morning he was here. So what did he say? He said, لَإِنْ كَانَ قَالَهَا لَقَدْ صَدَقَ فإني أصدقه في أبعد من ذلك أصدقه في خبر السماء ينزل الساعة. If he has said it, then he is right. He is righteous. I believe him. Because I believe him in more than that. Notice that the Prophet ﷺ never mentioned the ascension to the mushrikeen, to the polytheists of Medina. Why? Because the pagans never would have believed in Isra. How come? How the heck would they believe in the ascension? So he never mentioned that. He mentioned it to the Muslims, the ascension to heaven. So he said, I believe in him. I believe him in bigger than that. I believe him in the issue when he says, when he gives me the news from the heaven at the same spot, at the same time. So he went, until that moment, he did not become a Siddiq, the truthful. Until that moment. He believed. Listen to the story in Al-Bukhari. He went to the Prophet and he said, Ya Rasulullah, your people claim that you said so and so. And he said, yes, I did. So Abu Bakr said, Ya Rasulullah, can you describe Masjid al-Aqsa to me, please? فصف لي بيت المقدس. Describe Masjid al-Aqsa, or Bayt al-Maqdis. It was called Bayt al-Maqdis at that time. Describe Bayt al-Maqdis or Masjid al-Aqsa for me, because I visited it. Why did he ask that? He believed, but he wanted to get the glory of the Prophet ﷺ's description of Masjid al-Aqsa. So the Prophet ﷺ started to describe not what happened, by the way, started to describe what? The mosque itself. And he continuously saying, Abu Bakr, صدقت, صدقت, أشهد أنك رسول الله. You are right, you are right. I bear witness that you are the messenger of Allah. Until the end of the description of Al-Aqsa mosque. He said, you're truthful, you're right, I believe you, and I bear witness that you are the messenger of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and you, Abu Bakr, is from now on, you are a Siddiq. And whoever doesn't know what a Siddiq means, it's not only the truthful. A Siddiq is a rank, by the way. It's a rank. Allah Azza wa Jalla always in the Quran says, An-Nabiyyin wal-Siddiqeen wal-Shuhada. The prophets, the truthfuls, and the martyrs. So the truthfuls, as-Siddiqun, is a rank that is higher than the martyrs, higher than the Shuhada, and less than the prophets. And we have, by the way, in Islam, only two Siddiqeen were mentioned. One in the Quran and one in the Sunnah. The one in Sunnah who? Abu Bakr. What about the Quran? Sayyidah Maryam. And Sayyidah Maryam, by the way, her name was Maryam, which means at that time, وَإِنِّي سَمَّيْتُهَا Maryam, the servant of the mosque. Because she was named Maryam as a servant to the mosque. Which mosque? Al-Aqsa. So we have a Siddiq and a Siddiqa. Both of them are linked to what? To Masjid al-Aqsa. See how high this mosque is. See how great this mosque is. So you can understand when the Prophet ﷺ used to work for that mosque, how important that mosque was. After a few months of that journey, the Prophet ﷺ had the first people who asked him to migrate to them. We're speaking about whom here? Medina. People of Medina, Al-Ansar. أسألكم كاس مي إخوانا. الدكتور بس كنا خلص. So we have the migration to Medina happened afterwards, and the Prophet ﷺ moved from Mecca to Medina. And don't worry, I won't buy you two. I'm just joking. Thank you very much. What's your name? Izzuddin. MashaAllah. I have my son, his name is Izzuddin as well. But he's 7 years old. MashaAllah. And he's a troublemaker. Are you a troublemaker, Izzuddin? Yes? Oh, he is. Okay. He says yes. Right. Okay. Why everybody calls Izzuddin as a troublemaker? The Prophet ﷺ at that spot migrated to Medina. So now in Medina, the Prophet ﷺ has changed. He's no longer a man. He became a state. He became a leader. He became, the Jews used to call him at that time the king of Arabs, Malikul Arab, according to the Jews of Khaybar. So he became a state. تحول محمد إلى دولة. He got a city under his rule. So he became a ruler. So what is he going to do now? He's starting doing his strategic plans for all the way around him. Now the most important part here is not Jerusalem. Definitely. It comes in the second rank after what? After Mecca. Because Medina was not there yet. It ranked, just was developed later. الله يرضى عنك إن شاء الله. بارك الله فيك سيد. تمام. فالله يرضى عنك إن شاء الله يكرمك. فجزاك الله خير. فالآن the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, was it yours or mine?
No.
I'm just joking. Even if it was yours, I would have said just get another one because I can't just go there. I'm just joking now. Our brother Amir came, Dr. Amir came all the way from Cleveland, so I'm really happy that he is here. So what did the Prophet ﷺ do? When he migrated to Medina, people of Medina were like the people of Mecca at the beginning. They knew the importance of Mecca. They never knew the importance of Medina. On the contrary, of Jerusalem. On the contrary, Jerusalem for them was linked to the people who were directing their prayer towards Jerusalem. Who are they? The Jews. The Jews direct their prayer all the time towards Jerusalem. And because they had problems all the way before the migration, before Islam, they had a lot of troubles between the Arabs and the Jews at that time in Yathrib as it was called. So it was hard for them actually to pray towards Bayt al-Maqdis because they didn't have that connection with the Jews of Medina. However, the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to do that. And we know a story about that, by the way. There is a story that is mentioned by Ibn Hisham. It is the story of Al-Bara ibn Marouf radiallahu anhu. It was from the beginning of Al-Ansar. He gave the pledge to the Prophet ﷺ and the first pledge of Al-Aqaba, and he came again at the second pledge of Al-Aqaba. Between them, when he converted to Islam and gave the first pledge of Al-Aqaba, Bay'at Al-Aqaba Al-Ula, he went back. You know now that if you would like to go in Medina and pray towards Jerusalem, which is here, where would Mecca be? Behind you. Now in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ used to pray towards Jerusalem, but the Kaaba was in front of him, so you never feel the difference. But the Sahaba in Medina had this problem. So Al-Bara ibn Ma'rur mentioned, and it's a very interesting story by the way, he mentioned that he said to his friends while they were going back to Medina, he said, I have an opinion. I can't turn my back to the Kaaba. So if you would like, you can pray like me. They said, we were not ordered to pray towards the Kaaba. We were ordered to pray towards Jerusalem, Baytul Maqdis. He said, شأنكم إذا, do whatever you want. So they used to, look at that, the companions. They used to pray in one line, all of them towards Baytul Maqdis, and he was standing with them praying to the other way around. What would have happened if somebody did it today? Look at the Sahaba's understanding.
Zero tolerance policy.
Zero tolerance, huh? But look at the Sahaba's understanding. He had a mind, he had something in his mind, and he prayed. So he prayed like that for 1 year, until the time of the second Aqaba pledge. And he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said himself, he mentions the story by the way himself, he mentions the narration. He says, فَوَجَدْتُ فِي نَفْسِي مِمَّا فَعَلْتُ, يعني I was not comfortable with what I did. Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't ask us to pray towards the Kaaba. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I found it hard to put this building. He says, even al-bunayya, means this, I don't know how to say it in English. This little building, like yani, it's out of love. Yani like you say honey, it's not honey. It's your wife, for example, or it's your husband. It's not honey. or you have, or just little kids, like saying, "You're a little kid." It's very not, yani, as a matter of compliment. He said, "I couldn't find it in my heart to put this little building behind my back, so I prayed towards it, and all my friends or companions refused that, and they said that we have to pray towards the Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "قد كنت على قبلة لو صبرت عليها." You would have prayed towards the right qibla. You should have been patient on that. What does it mean? It hints that the qibla will be transferred, will be changed. Because our qibla should be Al-Kaaba. But why are we praying towards Jerusalem? So we are reversing the question. Not why the qibla was changed. It's actually why the qibla in the first place was towards Jerusalem. In order to build its love in your mind and to understand that it's not for this or for that. It's yours. It is a holy place for you. So he went back and he prayed towards Bayt al-Maqdis after he understood. So you see, now after the migration of the Prophet ﷺ, after 1.5 years in Medina, now the Prophet ﷺ spent the first year putting the milestones of the state in Medina. So he never left, by the way, at the first year. The second year, he left for the first time for غزوة الأبواء, then غزوة بواط, then غزوة بدر الأولى, then غزوة العشيرة, then غزوة بدر الكبرى. These are the names of the غزوات or the battles of the Prophet ﷺ, or the military expeditions. So when the Prophet ﷺ was in the second year, he was wondering, now the people of Medina have been praying towards Bayt al-Maqdis for 1.5 years now. So when is the time going to be going back to Mecca? Why? Because this would mean that their strategic movements would have been afterwards towards Mecca. So that was why the revelation came to the Prophet ﷺ. And this is what is meant in the Quran. قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. He was wondering. He was looking at the sky, wondering when. So Allah Azza wa Jal ordered him to pray towards Mecca. Who went to Medina here? Medina. Okay, mashallah, a lot of people went to Medina. Have you visited this mosque? What is it called? The two Qiblas, yeah? The mosque of two Qiblas. People, by the way, have this information wrong usually about this mosque. People think that this was the place where the Qibla was changed. So, what is the right thing? It wasn't. They used to tell me. No, it's not that. But what is the story of this mosque? The Prophet ﷺ prayed in his mosque, Salatul Dhuhr. And then he started wondering, when? So before praying Asr, Allah Subhanahu revealed to him the new revelation. قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Turn your face in prayer towards Masjid al-Haram. So the Prophet ﷺ at that time, the first prayer was Al-Asr. At the beginning of Al-Asr, the Prophet ﷺ recited the verses and he prayed at the back of the mosque towards Mecca. A man prayed with him Al-Asr towards Mecca. And then he went back to this area which was called at that time Diyaru Bani Salama. A family of Medina was there called Banu Salama. Used to pray in this mosque because at that time it was very far away from Masjid al-Nabawi, so they couldn't pray all the time at Masjid al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they didn't hear the news. They were praying towards Masjid al-Aqsa. They were just praying towards north. And while they were bowing in the second ruk'ah, the man passed through them and looked at them and he noticed that they were praying towards Jerusalem. So he said, أشهد أني صليت مع رسول الله قبل الكعبة. I bear witness that, I testify that I have prayed with the Prophet ﷺ towards the Kaaba. فَدَارُوا كَمَا هُمْتُ إِلَى الْكَعْبَةِ. While they were prostrating, without finishing the prayer, without cutting it, without saying, who the heck said that? Without saying, what is your evidence? They listened, they obeyed. While they were just bowing, doing the ruku'ah. Can you imagine how they did that? This is an advertisement or an ad. How did they do that? Usually, Imam in the beginning, then the men, then the ladies, right? How could you imagine at the beginning? Well, you can imagine that they might just have turned their faces directly while they are in the spots, right? Wrong. Because at that time, the women will become at the beginning, at the front, and the men in the middle, and the Imam would be way in the back. So what did they do? They walked half a circle while they were bowing. They walked, and this marked this place as the only place on earth that one single prayer was prayed towards both of them, the two qibla. This is what the importance of this mosque, or this is the importance of this mosque and the significance of this mosque. And subhanAllah, it was in Medina. Medina is the only place on earth where the Muslims prayed one time towards the two qiblas, which is this mosque. So the Prophet ﷺ prayed towards prayed towards Mecca. Why? Because the strategy now meant that he should pray towards Mecca and he should plan for Mecca. And this is why afterwards, Badr, Uhud, all of these battles, until the time when Quraysh, the Arabs, and the Jews of Khaybar came all the way to Mecca, to Medina, with 10,000 soldiers, surrounded Medina to the extent that the Prophet ﷺ couldn't do anything but to dig the trench. And that was Ghazwat Al-Khandaq, or the trench, the 5th year of Hijrah. And they lost. We all the news. We know all what happened afterwards. They just lost, and Allah just sent them wind, and they just went back. Now, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, after the end of that battle, he said, "Al-an naghzuhum wa la yaghzuhum." Now they will never attack us. We will initiate any attacks over Qurayshins. نحن نسير إليهم. We will initiate. Right after that, the Prophet ﷺ sent the first ever militant expedition on this route. All of the first 5 years of his prophethood, of his migration, ﷺ, marked all the expeditions, the military expeditions towards Mecca, all around Medina. But he never been to this route. This route, actually, it has got two routes. One of them is here, which is called the inner route, that goes in the desert towards Tabuk. Have anybody been to Tabuk? 1, 2. It's a nice city. It's a desert, but it has got, by the way, olive trees. Yeah, it has got a lot of water underground. And there is another one, a long route that goes from Medina to Yanbu, and from Yanbu you go all the way at the Red Sea to Ayla, which is Aqaba of Jordan, and then to Elia, which is Jerusalem at that time. So the Prophet ﷺ, which side is this? Which side is this? North, south? Northwest. You could find not a single expedition before that year, before the 5th year of Hijrah, to the northwest. Once the Prophet ﷺ secured Mecca to some extent, he said they will never initiate any attacks. Now we will initiate. Starting from that spot, he sent his first ever expedition to that area. A Sariya, or an expedition called Sariya to Hisma. Hisma, according to that, Hisma is here. Just here. And it was led by Zayd ibn Haritha radiallahu anhu. And then he started, by the way, sending, at least he had 17 expeditions starting from that time. towards the northwest. Towards the northwest. Which means that he started now preparing for the next step. See that? How the Prophet ﷺ used to act. Thank you. I never noticed that. Sorry. It's not me who's sorry. The computer is sorry. I didn't do that. Okay. Now the Prophet ﷺ was then, you can notice, so he secured Mecca to some extent, and he started sending soldiers to that area to expeditions to that area to know what is it there. Why? Because it is quite far away. It's 1,200 kilometers. We are speaking about 900 miles away from 800 miles from Medina. So it's quite a long time. A long way. So a long distance. So the Prophet ﷺ started the expeditions to know the nature of that area, because if he goes to Jerusalem, he wouldn't go just for a place where Quraysh is, his people whom he knows. He would have gone to a place where the biggest power on earth rules, the Byzantine Empire, which was at that time has already gained its victory against the Persians. So they were number one in the world. So he couldn't just go by himself or easily. He started discovering the place or discovering the area. But he never been himself. He never went to that at that spot. He didn't go in that route himself. After noticing that route, he noticed that he has got one main obstacle on that route, which is Khaybar, a big city. I don't know if anybody here has ever visited Khaybar. And I mean Khaybar, not Khaybar that we know today. Not Khaybar that you know today. You've been to Umrah on the road. That's not Khaybar, by the way. People just go through a new Khaybar, like New York. It's something called New Khaybar. Khaybar, the original one, is still there, by the way. All the castles, everything is still there. But it's about, no, it's open, you can just go there. But nobody lives there except for hyenas. And, الوحوش والذئاب مش عارفة. But you can go there, but it's quite far away. It's about 30 kilometers away from the current Khaybar. But it's empty. However, at that time, Khaybar was an obstacle. Why? Because they had a very important role in the battle of Al-Khandaq, the trench. So the Prophet ﷺ went himself after he secured Mecca with a treaty, with a truce, called the Truce of Al-Hudaybiyah. He went to Mecca, he had this truce for 10 years, then he went himself to Khaybar, and he just neutralized them, the people of Khaybar at that time. Neutralizing, what does it mean? He never actually wiped them out. He didn't kill them. He just crushed their power. Crushed their power and made it, and just broke it as an obstacle, and it was no longer an obstacle. On the contrary, the Jews in Khaybar became actually assistance to the Muslims on that route. So the Prophet ﷺ went there, but he never been at that spot. He couldn't go further. Why? Because Mecca is still with Quraysh. It was still with Quraysh. So what about that strong empire that actually rules Jerusalem at that time? The Prophet ﷺ at that spot started actually sending messages to the kings and the emperors of the world. He sent this message, not this one actually, this is from Muqawqis. Yeah, from Muqawqis, al-Qibt. He sent a message just like this, by the way. A letter, as usual, to the Byzantine Empire, to the Byzantine emperor, Heraclius. Amongst all of this, or all of the emperors and kings that the Prophet ﷺ sent messages and letters to, the only one who did not receive his letter in his capital was who? Was Heraclius. The Prophet ﷺ intentionally sent it to him while he was visiting Jerusalem. He was in Jerusalem, and it's hadith in al-Bukhari, by the way. Abu Sufyan was going to Gaza at that time. He owned the land in Gaza. And he was in Gaza where he found some soldiers asking about some Arabs from Arabia, and they took him to Elia, which is Jerusalem, and he suddenly found himself with his people face to face with Emperor Heraclius. Whoa! And he started asking him about the Prophet ﷺ. We know that hadith. Do you know that hadith? He started asking him about the Prophet ﷺ, about his background, about his manners, about the war between them and him. And in the end, he mentioned something very important that happened in Jerusalem. He said, "You mentioned that he was never true. He was always truthful, and so I knew that he wouldn't lie. He would never just be truthful to men, to people, and just lie on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You mentioned this, and you mentioned that, and you mentioned this, and you mentioned that." And at the end, he said, "And if that man, Abu Sufyan, if that man, Muhammad was as you described, فَسَيَمْلِكُ مَوْضِعَ قَدَمَيَّ هَاتَيْنِ, he will own the place that I'm standing on now. He would own Jerusalem, people. Jerusalem." And they went out. Right after sending this message, I can call it actually a diplomatic first step. So right after that, the Prophet ﷺ sent 15 of his Sahaba to an area in Jordan today, near At-Tafila, called Dhatu Atlah. 14 of them were killed. They were not fighting. They were just sent there to spread the message of Islam to the people. So they were killed. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ assembled a 3,000 soldiers army. And he sent them this time to Mu'tah. He didn't tell them where to go. He said, just go northwest and you will attack who? The Byzantines. So he started now actually examining the strength of these people who are controlling the Levant for about 600 years, 300 years before Christ. Before embracing Christianity, and about 200 to 300 years after embracing Christianity. After they became from Romans, they became Byzantines. So the Prophet ﷺ sent his army there, and they arrived in Mu'tah. And Mu'tah is well known. It's a small village south of a city in Jordan of today called Karak. Anybody knows Karak? Anybody been to Karak before? Karak has a very nice reputation about some meal in Jordan that's called mansaf. You love mansaf. I know it because of the way how you laughed. Okay. Mansaf is quite nice, but it's like concrete. You just eat it and you go directly, you crash. The battle ended with, I could say, no win, no lose. And Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anh took over the leadership during the battle because the 3 leaders were killed, radiallahu anhum, Zayd ibn Haritha, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and Abdullah ibn Rawaha. And he just withdrew his army because it was 3,000 in the face of 200,000. And he went back to Medina, and the Muslims were very angry. Why did you just run away? You runners, you ran away from the battle? The children used to just throw dust on them. And the Prophet ﷺ said, he defended them, saying, they are not cowards or running away. They are to go back and resume. ليسوا الفرار ولكنهم الكرار إن شاء الله. They will resume fighting. And that means that he had something in his mind. But he couldn't go himself. Because Mecca is still with Quraysh. Because he never know, if he goes there, Mecca might just break the truce, go and attack Medina. But this only lasted for about a few months after the Battle of Al-Medina, when Quraysh broke the truce, really, as the Prophet ﷺ was expecting them to do. And the Prophet ﷺ went himself to Mecca, secured Mecca, and captured Mecca, and that's it. Quraysh ended. Or the paganism in Mecca ended forever. So the Prophet ﷺ finished the whole part that is related to what? To Mecca. Now, what is the second step in his strategy? Now he started concentrating only on Jerusalem. So this is why in the 8th year he went for Mecca. In the 9th year, just a few months by the way, because Mecca, Fathu Mecca was at the end of Ramadan. Then afterwards there was Hunayn, there was a Ta'if, so we went back at the time, almost at the time of the Hajj. So just a few months afterwards, actually 7 months after that, the Prophet ﷺ in Rajab assembled a huge army. And he went himself, this time himself, to Tabuk, which is the closest part of Arabia to the Levant. Now, let us just see something or check something with Tabuk. If you read any of these books of As-Sirah, any one of the books of As-Sirah, you would notice that almost no one mentioned a direct reason for the battle or for the Ghazwa of Tabuk. You would notice that, by the way. Why? Because the reason was very vague. Everybody starts saying, then the Prophet ﷺ declared that he was going to fight the Byzantines and he went to Tabuk. Why? I don't know. Ibn Kathir noticed that, by the way, and he tried to know why. And Mubarak Furi noticed that and he tried to know. But in order to know, let us see what he did during the way and while he was in Tabuk, and you will know why did he do that. While he was going to Tabuk, I mentioned that there are two routes. The short route to Jerusalem, which goes all the way from Medina to Tabuk, then to Jerusalem, which is just there. And there is the long one that goes from Medina to Yanbu', then all the way to Maqna, Ayla, and then to Jerusalem. That's a long way. So what did the Prophet ﷺ do? He went on the short road to Tabuk, which is about 400 miles away from Medina. The Prophet ﷺ went to Tabuk while he was going with his army, 30,000 Muslims. While he was going with his army, he used to do a break every day. It took him 20 days to arrive in Tabuk. While he was on the road, he used to sit and take a break every day and build a small mosque. Just a small mosque. Wow, building a small mosque in one night, that's a miracle. No, it's not a miracle, by the way. I'm just joking. Building a mosque is very important. It's very easy, by the way. A mosque doesn't need to have a minaret or building a mosque in Islam is just having a land that is yours, by the way. It's not for everybody's. Having a land surrounded by a fence and directed towards the Qibla. That's a mosque. That's a mosque. That's building a mosque. So building a mosque in Islam is very easy. Building a mosque in Islam is very easy. So the Prophet ﷺ used to build mosques all the way from Medina to Tabuk. So how many mosques were there? 20. Before arriving to Tabuk at that time was a small city, a small village actually, with just few people and with no water except for a very small spring of water there, of water, if I could say in Scottish, of water, if I could say in American. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered the Muslims with him not to touch that spring, the water spring. He wanted to do something. And two of the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, just arrived there before him and they tried to dig in it, and the water just became less than it was before even. So the Prophet ﷺ was very angry at them, and he went back to the water, and he had the some for the water in his. Sometimes you say water, sometimes you say water. For God's sake, just say one word. It's water. Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ put some water in his hand, and he did the wudu, and he spit in the water. And suddenly, a big spring exploded. Boof! Mu'adh ibn Jabal was next to him, and the Prophet ﷺ looked at him and smiled and said, Ya Mu'adh, if you had longer, enough time in your life, you would see what is here. قَدْ مُلِئَ جِنَانًا, full of gardens. By the way, Tabuk is beautiful. Tabuk today is green. So what does that mean? Tabuk became a city. They had a very big spring of water there. So the Prophet ﷺ did this, and he sat there for 20 days. What did he do in these 20 days? The Prophet ﷺ never just sat and waited only. He sent expeditions around him and wrote, and he didn't write himself ﷺ, but he ordered to write some treaties between him and some of these communities around him. Two of them were very important. There were only three. Two of them were very, very important. One of them was with a small village called Maqna. It is called Maqna until today. It's very well known in Saudi Arabia. About 70 kilometers away from, or 45 miles away from the Jordanian-Syrian borders, on the Red Sea. And the second one, at that time, by the way, the people in Maqna were Jews. The next one was Ayla, this one, which is today the city of Aqaba in Jordan, Al-Aqaba. And at that time, the people of Aqaba were Christians. So the Prophet ﷺ had these agreements with both of them. What did he say in these agreements? I was shocked when I read them. The people of Maqna are obliged, according to that agreement, to give any army, or any Muslim army that comes in the future and pass through their lands, to provide them with food and armory. The people of Ayla are, according to this treaty, were obliged to provide any army that goes through their lands with water. So what did the Prophet ﷺ do actually? He provided any army in the future with water, armory, and food. That's an army. And notice that both of them are on the long route towards Jerusalem. What about the short route? He put like stations, mosques, and at the end he opened the water spring. Then he was sitting in his tent, small tent, in Tabuk, and the hadith is in Al-Bukhari as well. And one of the Sahaba who used to joke with him, and his name was Auf ibn Malik, came and asked for permission to enter the small tent. He said, I came to the Prophet ﷺ in Tabuk while he was in a small tent. So I asked for permission, can I enter, Ya Rasulullah? So the Prophet ﷺ said, come, enter. So he looked at the tent and it was too small. So he wanted to laugh with the Prophet ﷺ or joke with him. He said, أَأَدْخُلُ كُلِّي أَمْ بَعْضِي? Can I enter myself, whole myself, or just part of me? So the Prophet ﷺ didn't laugh. On the contrary, he just said, Udkhul kulla, come, all of you. Why? He wanted to tell him something. There was a revelation coming. And without even asking the Prophet anything, the Prophet started saying, Ya Auf, count 6 things that will happen before the Day of Judgment. That is actually a prophecy. So what does it mean? It's a revelation. First of them is my death. Auf says in another narration, he says, فَوَجَمْتُ وَجْمًا. I was, what? For the first time he mentions his death. And I was about to cry. In another narration he said, فَاتْسْتَعْبَرْتُ. I started crying. And the Prophet ﷺ said, say 1. I said 1. And the next one, what did he say? The Fath, the taking over of Baytul Maqdis. After his death. So you know now what did he do? He went back to Medina after that. he prepared everything because he knew that he was not going to be the man who goes to Jerusalem and leading the Muslims there. So he prepared everything. Then he said, I will die, then you will go to Jerusalem. The hadith again is in al-Bukhari. What about the other things, the other 4 things? I just read the hadith and you know them. Okay? It's very easy. However, the Prophet ﷺ went back to Medina. And when the Prophet ﷺ just challenged those people in the empire, in the Byzantine Empire, number 1 in the world, and they were afraid of him, fighting him, all the Arabs in Arabia starting just going directly towards the Prophet ﷺ and giving him pledges and just as delegations and embrace Islam. Because this is why that year was called Aam al-Wufud, the year of delegations, because there were many delegations of from all over Arabia came to the Prophet ﷺ. One of these delegations was from a city in Palestine. The first Muslims of Palestine. They were Arabs at that time. And they were the people of Hebron, Al-Khalil. How many people here are from Al-Khalil? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, all the time people from Al-Khalil. I can find them everywhere in the world. Even in China. They have Ching Chang Chung Abu Snene. Okay. The people of Hebron actually were the first of the people of Palestine to embrace Islam. They went to the Prophet, and one of the main man, the leader of this delegation was Tamim ad-Dari radiyallahu anhu. He's well known for many hadith. He was, by the way, the only Sahabi, the only companion whom the Prophet narrated from. Not narrated from the Prophet. All the Sahabas used to hear from the Prophet, narrate. The only one whom the Prophet ﷺ heard something and narrated from him was Tamim ad-Dari. It's a very important story, the story of Ad-Dajjal, the Antichrist. It's a very well-known hadith. So when Tamim came to the Prophet ﷺ, he sat with his brothers after they embraced Islam. And we know that the people of Hebron are, mashallah, very good businessmen. So since that time, until today, they sat with themselves and they said, let's ask the Prophet ﷺ to give us a land in Hebron. MashaAllah, very good businessman. As usual, the people of Nablus are not happy now. People of Nablus are on the north and people of Hebron are on the south, and all the time they have problems in Palestine. Okay, so they asked the Prophet ﷺ to grant them a land. Usually the Prophet ﷺ never gave a land that was not controlled directly by him, politically, except for that time. When they asked him for a land in Palestine, just 30 kilometers away from Jerusalem, which is about 20 or 18 miles, 18 miles south of Jerusalem, the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, I will do. How come? Why? Because you remember what happened in that night. He led the prophets there. So he owned the land religiously. So he expressed his legitimacy on that land by granting this piece of land to its people who were residing in it, the people of the family of Tamim ad-Dari and his brothers. He gave them a land. And that land, by the way, is still owned by the descendants of Tamim ad-Dari, and they are a very well-known family called At-Tamimi. At-Tamimi. And that is the land that has been given to them. It has been renovated or renewed many times by many Muslim states, ending with the Ottoman Empire, who actually re-gave them the land again and reassured them that this land is yours. And they gave them even the waqf, the plan of the waqf that is well known until today for the Aila of the family, of At-Tamimi until today. So the Prophet ﷺ even expressed his legitimacy, expressed his if I could say not legitimacy, if I could say his sovereignty over that land, his religious sovereignty. And it was the only land that the Prophet ﷺ gave to people before being there politically, because he owned it religiously according to the night journey. And at the end of his life ﷺ, he prepared an army led by Usama ibn Zayd ibn Harith radiallahu anhu. And he asked him to go to that land, to the land that we called, again, next to Palestine, here, next to Mu'tah. He asked him to go there. And he asked him to go very fast. And he died. So the first thing that Abu Bakr did was to send that army. He asked him just to go there very quickly, to burn a few lands and to go back. Why burning some lands and going back? Burning some fields, just small part, and going back, just to show them that we're here. What did that happen actually? What did that do with the death of the Prophet ﷺ? Ibn Asakir rahimahullah, in his book, The History of Damascus, says the news of the death of the Prophet ﷺ and the news of the attack of Usama ibn Zayd on just a small part on the fields next to Mu'tah arrived to the Byzantines on the same day, because it was very quickly going. So all the news came directly together. So the Byzantines were shocked, and they said, "ما بال هؤلاء بموت صاحبهم أن أغاروا على أرضنا." So these people never cared about the death of their leader to the extent that they attacked us. So they were afraid of the Muslims. See how the Prophet ﷺ was protecting them by these actions even after his death. But Abu Bakr at the beginning was very, he had the apostasy, a very hard situation, apostasy, and he had to be very engaged with the apostasy. After the end of that, he ordered the Muslims to prepare themselves to go to Jerusalem. At that time, Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu, who led the last battle of apostasy called Al-Yamama. And where is Al-Yamama? It's near Riyadh. Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia of today. Al-Yamama is not far away from it. So he crushed Musaylim al-Kadhab, Musaylim the liar, the highest, the biggest apostasy, the biggest apostasy movement at that time. And then Khalid didn't go back to Medina. He continued his way all the way to Iraq, or to Kuwait of today, and from Kuwait of today he went to South Iraq, because he noticed he was just actually he was a military man. So Khalid looked at the world and he said, the Persians are already weak, and we can now go and expand our state in Iraq and save them, because they were Arabs at that time and not Persians. So he said, we can go there to the Arabic lands of Iraq and take them. So he went to Iraq. But Abu Bakr had a different idea. Actually, anyone who would think about it just strategically, purely, he or she would say, well, go to Persia because they were weak, and then go to Byzantium. Right? But Abu Bakr had something else in his mind. He sent 4 armies to Jerusalem. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, as I said, sent 4 armies directly, led by Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, and who else? And Abu Ubaidah Amr ibn al-Jarrah radiallahu anhum, and Shurahbil ibn Hasana, and the last one was led by Amr ibn al-As. The first 3 were ordered by Abu Bakr to go on the short route to Tabuk. So they went on that route. While they were going, they found the Prophet ﷺ prepared them spots, mosques, just to lay down and rest. And at the end, before entering the Levant, they arrived at Tabuk and they found big spring of water there. So the Prophet ﷺ prepared everything. They had the water, they had the food, they had everything. Then they spread into the Levant. What about the 4th one? Amr ibn al-As. His mother, by the way, Amr ibn al-As is from here, from this land, from the south of Palestine, Amr radiallahu anhu. He ordered Amr ibn al-As to go through the long way. He didn't want all of them to go through all the same way. So he was supposed to have a lot of water, a lot of food, a lot of armory, right? Ibn Asakir says no. He went with not much of water, not much of food, not even much of armory. He went with a very light army. Why? Because once he arrived here, about to arrive to Asham, he arrived to Maqna, and he said, there is an agreement between you and the Prophet ﷺ. Now you bring us armory and you bring us food. Then before entering the Negev desert in Palestine, he went to Ayla, to Aqaba, and he said, we have an agreement with the Prophet ﷺ, now we have water. So he assembled a new army. Everything was waiting for him there. And he entered, so he actually arrived before the three armies, because his army was very light. And he was the first one to engage and fight with the Byzantines in a battle called the Battle of Dathin, that was not far away from Deir al-Balah in Gaza of today. So the people, the Sahaba, continued their work for Jerusalem, for taking over Jerusalem at the end of the time of Abu Bakr and at the beginning of the time of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, until they entered Masjid al-Aqsa. Led by whom? Led by Umar himself personally. The only city ever that asked for Umar and he went. Why? Because he knew that it was Jerusalem. While Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh entered Masjid al-Aqsa, he looked at among 15,000 soldiers inside Masjid al-Aqsa, and he said, where is Bilal? Radiallahu anh. Hadratu Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anh. And why Bilal in particular? Bilal came and Umar said, oh Bilal, how about you do the adhan for us, please? You perform the adhan. Bilal never performed the adhan since the time when the Prophet ﷺ died. Since that day. The Prophet ﷺ died before Dhuhr. He tried to do the adhan for Dhuhr, he couldn't. Then he tried at Asr, he couldn't, so he stopped. He never performed it since that day until now, until that time. Umar said to him, can you please, how about, just like that, ألا تؤذن لنا? How about you perform the adhan for us? I can. And he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I have made a pledge on myself not to perform the adhan for anyone after the Prophet ﷺ. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, since you said no, then I'm ordering you, perform the adhan. Umar, nobody can say no. أما وقد أبيت فأذن. I'm ordering you now. He said, since you ordered me, I will perform it. So he performed the adhan for the first time after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And when the Muslims heard the adhan of Bilal, who came directly popped up to their minds? The Prophet ﷺ. So everybody just started crying for remembering the Prophet ﷺ, for the memorization of the Prophet ﷺ. And that was the time when the story of Muhammad ﷺ and Jerusalem completed. Why did Umar radiallahu anh insisted that Bilal in particular would be the first one to perform the adhan in Masjid al-Aqsa? It wasn't only because he was the performer of the adhan or the mu'adhin of the Prophet. There were other mu'adhins, by the way. Abdallah ibn Maktoum, for example. But Bilal has got something that nobody on earth has ever had. Bilal radiallahu anhu was the first person ever to perform the adhan in the Prophet ﷺ's mosque. Then during the time of Fath of Mecca, Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anhu was the first ever to perform the adhan as well in Masjid al-Haram. So look at Umar's understanding. So it was Bilal as well who was supposed to be as well the first one ever to perform the adhan in Masjid al-Aqsa. Why? Because there are three brothers, not only two. Three, ya Muslims, three. Umar understand this. He understood that. And all the Sahaba understood that. And that was how the Prophet ﷺ's presence became in their mind while they were entering the masjid, performing the adhan and praying. Inshallah, very soon, we will do the same. We will go to Masjid al-Aqsa. We will free it, inshallah. And we will liberate it, and we will perform the adhan there with no occupation. And at that spot, remember the Prophet ﷺ, because he was the one who prepared the mosque not only for his companions but for you. Thank you very much for listening. Jazakumullah khair, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.